Hello everybody, this is Tom Breeze here with another episode of Path to Purchase, and of course I'm with my good buddy
Mr. Oli Bilson.
Mr. Oli Bilson. And today we have an interesting conversation to have because if you're anything like me, and I'm going to go with me for now because I'm sure Oli has a different perspective on this himself, but if you're anything like me, then when it comes to kind of entrepreneurship, running your own business, then you're going to constantly be having these different ideas. And some ideas go into your brain and straight back out again because you just know you can't tackle that one. Even though it sounds great, you leave it alone. And it's good to know when you can leave things alone. And then sometimes you catch hold of an idea and you think, actually, this is a real runner. I want to pursue this a little bit further, see where this takes us. And I want to at least give it a good test and experiment with this new idea that you might have. I know that for ourselves in the agency, we are very good at YouTube advertising. And we're often thinking about different ideas about what might be the next step for the business. Do we just keep on with the advertising side of things, or do we look at more organic YouTube? Do we look at other ways of getting different types of clients, or maybe even becoming the client ourselves, and all that sort of stuff? And so we're always thinking of these new ideas. And I think I'm getting pretty good at knowing deep down what feels right and what is a good decision to take most of the time. But that said, I wonder if there's a strategy to this, because I definitely don't have a strategy. I kind of rely on my gut a little bit here most of the time for myself. But I mean, Oli, I'm going to pass over to you now and see what your experience is, because I'm sure that you come up with ideas. Do you have something that you use as a filter, or do you have anything that you use as a way of determining whether an idea is going to be a good idea? What tends to be your strategy when it comes to this sort of thinking?
Yeah, sure. So I was actually on a podcast the end part of last year, and somebody asked me if you were talking to your, a younger version of yourself, and you were going back 10, 15 years or so ago, what is it that you would have said to yourself that would have made an impact on how things would have played out, and what would you have done differently? And it was a good question.
That's almost like an episode by itself. That sounds like a great question.
Yeah, it was. And the first thing that came to my mind, and it's still the same thing that I stand by now, is time in general is something that you need to respect, and that that you need to consider what you do with your time. And so often as entrepreneurs, as business owners, you need to kind of create a litmus test, as it were, for different opportunities that come your way. And sometimes the different circles, that you mix in, the different people you associate yourself with, or as a byproduct of how successful you are, or sometimes how quickly you fail as well, sometimes in business, leads you to different opportunities. And we're always thinking of new ways to do things. But you've got to be very selective over what you do, because there isn't an infinite amount of time to do everything. And some things have a much higher multiple of the time that you spend in terms of revenue, and other things give you a multiple in terms of leverage of your own time as well, which is also a consideration. So I think my answer really revolved around picking those opportunities very wisely, and kind of having creating a litmus test for taking on opportunities, whatever they may be. So whenever anything presented itself as an opportunity, I would ask, myself, is this going to move me further forwards? Is it going to leverage my time? Is it going to build and enable us to scale our business? And is it congruent with what we're doing? And is it going to take my focus away? There's lots of things that you should consider whenever, looking at different opportunities that come your way. I mean, I'm sure you've had lots of opportunities. I know people, right now, in fact, I had somebody the other week who wanted to do some kind of equity deal with their business, which is quite a unique situation. And I've done other things which have been kind of acquisitions and mergers and other things like that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they can be quite distracting. Whatever effort you think it's going to take, it undoubtedly takes more of your own resources or your team's resources or whatever you have around you. And of course, there's only so much capacity for that in any given situation.
Do you know, I read a book, you'll be pleased to hear, Once Upon a Time.
Helpful, yeah.
And that's the end of that comment there. I read a book called, it'll come to me in a second, I think it was Made to Stick, I think it was. A great book. I probably referenced it many a time because it's great for learning how to create really good video and be memorable with your story and your brand and all that sort of good stuff as well. But one of the things that was a big takeaway for me was they talked about in the past, in the military, they realised, and this is, let's say, a long time ago, they realised that when they were going to war, they used to be very prescriptive and say, right, you, Mr. Soldier A, you're going to do this. Soldier B, you're going to do this. Soldier C, you're going to do this. And that's the thing you need to do. Like, you're either going to do it or you're going to get killed, and therefore you won't be able to do it. That's kind of like, it's very, very prescriptive, and the battle plan was laid out. And then what they obviously realize is that whatever plans you have, they're great until you meet the enemy, because the enemy is not static. They're going to be doing their own thing as well. And so you need to be dynamic with things. And so they realize a better version of this is to say, all right, well, you don't have a specific task. Instead, you have a goal in mind. Like, what we're looking to do as a team, you guys are going to work together to achieve that result. And they called it commander's intent. And so then kind of like that would be the takeaway for the book for me is like, I know I have a commander's intent. I don't, like, everyone always talks about kind of goal setting and say, here's what you want to achieve. This is what you want to go for. And whilst I've always looked at that as a kind of like, yes, I understand the merits of goal setting, I often look at goal setting and think, well, I don't want to limit myself. And also, I change my mind quite quickly. There is probably a commander's intent, big end, like what I want to achieve and where I want to go with things, but I kind of leave that in my unconscious, subconscious, whatever you want to call it. But there's kind of like a movement in one direction which I know I want to achieve, and then I break that down into normally quarterly goals or yearly goals to say, I definitely want to be there by this point at the end of the year, but hopefully a lot better, or there or thereabouts, or see how the year takes me. But that's kind of that's where I'm focusing my attention. And then any opportunity that comes my way that is outside of that remit, that I'm like, sounds great, but not for me right now. So I know I can say no to loads and loads of things. That comes down to different client opportunities, different prospects that might come through, different products we might bring to the market, different services we might bring to the market, etc. If you're not, it's very easy to know what opportunities are to say yes and no to. So I suppose that's kind of like a big part of my. Whilst you were speaking, I was thinking about like, what is it that I actually do to achieve kind of making decisions of what decisions to take when it comes to opportunities. But I know that having that bigger, higher goal of like commander's intent, not to say I want to achieve something, but just like I'm heading in that direction. And I know I can trust myself to move pretty quick in that direction, but the more I can clear out of the pathway just to be like, that's where I'm going, then the better opportunities tend to come about. And I don't know if that's letting the universe do its thing or whether, and I don't really necessarily believe in that, but I do believe in the more things you say no to frees you up to say yes to the right things, but you'll see them with much more clarity. And then once you start moving that direction, the momentum will inevitably come. I know I've done that before where we look to different avenues of doing kind of advertising in different capacities for clients. Like we looked at doing some YouTube advertising, we looked at doing some TV advertising, we looked at doing Facebook advertising, and obviously when it came down to it, I was like, well, I know YouTube really well, and we're getting really good results there. Let's just pull all of our efforts into YouTube. And as a result, we've skyrocketed and gone really, really quickly in one direction. I don't believe that's one decision that's achieved that, but it's definitely been very, very helpful. And so it just gives you that laser-like focus. And I don't want to sound like the kind of seminars you hear and like everyone talking about like, oh, what you need to do is niche down. And well, I don't necessarily fully believe in that, but I do believe in saying no to a lot of things to clear up for your kind of vision of what where you do want to go.
Yeah, and I think that talking to that is in the same interview, I said that you almost want to create a not to do list that gives you, that almost empowers you to say, I'm very aware of the fact that I probably shouldn't be doing these things, as well as kind of, opportunities that present themselves. The things that I focus my attention and time on right now, here are a list of things that as they come towards me, I want to remind myself that I definitely shouldn't be involved in them and that actually somebody else should be handling them for me, or at least I should find somebody to go and handle them for me if I don't have somebody to do that. So I think that's another takeaway as well, in which is a very a conversation that has some synergy towards taking or not taking or appraising opportunities, is also looking at that not to do list of things that that you should definitely be avoiding doing, as well. So you can focus your attention on the things where you add the most value, where you have, you are applying your unique ability. Somebody that I followed for quite a long time is called Dan Sullivan, from a strategic coach, and he has this concept of this unique ability, and really that's what you want to hone in on, and allowing to yourself to build a team of process managers and project managers, two different types of managers, to take these things off your plate so you can just focus on where you add the most value to the business. And there's a lot to be said for that, for sure, from thinking about all of these different things. I know that one of the things that I would say, and I would positively encourage other people to think about this, is this concept of layering. And let me kind of explain what that is. Now, we have done this in our business whereby we have created an income stream that ultimately then has gone on to be its own entity, its own business in itself. It has its own organizational structure. But initially, we layered another income stream into the business with the intention that if it was positive, if it was taken initially well and it was profitable, then that would ultimately become its own business and cost center within the group of businesses that we had. And the way to layer is to actually build, to create that revenue from your existing resources and your existing capacity. So you would actually, in my case, I had a marketing team that I had built, that I was paying for, that was on my payroll, that was building my franchise business, and we were doing extremely well, and we'd scaled from 0 to 170 franchisees internationally in less than 4 years as a result of this marketing team. Well, my next thoughts were, because I was doing consulting, that we may start to offer some level of agency services and use that team that was already familiar with all of the dynamic response marketing principles and online stuff that we were doing, but just do it for other people. So I created that income stream initially that then grew into what we now know to be our, obviously, Oliver Bilson marketing business as its own agency, as its own business standalone from the other business. And it's that is a smarter way to with a way that leverages its existing resources and capacity that you've got, to be able to still retain the focus, which is really important, which is what you were talking about there, in your existing business, while still creating an additional income stream that ultimately may develop into something that honours itself to be, a business in its own right. And we've actually done that a few times where we've looked for these opportunities to cross pollinate or cross-sell or upsell other services we've got. We did it before that franchise business in a training business, and the training business fed the franchise business, and that became its own entity. And so there was this obvious ascension path that we created to create these own entities of themselves, and that's the concept of layering.
So you're taking something that you already have existing kind of assets in place and saying, right, well, we can almost like duplicate that type of work, but just apply it to a different scenario.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was also one of the metrics we look at as we've grown has been revenue per employee. And everybody should look at how much money they're earning from your employees. It's a very simple calculation. Top line turnover divided by how many employees you have is one way to look at revenue per employee. But there's other more complicated mechanisms of looking, because obviously not everybody's paid proportionately either. So, there's other ways to calculate profit per employee as well, which is a slightly more complicated way of doing things. But very worthwhile doing if your business lends itself to that kind of approach. It's interesting because you're paying for those people, and by introducing this layered approach of new income streams, you actually get a higher multiple for the clients that you are a higher multiple for those that staff, that cost that you've got as well, which is definitely a way to increase it for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I think that like something that's one of the interesting things that I had with my mentor, James Shremko, was looking at your revenue per hour, like your own individual revenue per hour and what tasks you're working on, because some of the tasks you work on definitely don't warrant like how much you should be earning.
Yeah, sure.
You might have like 20% of the things you do make you $500 an hour, let's say for argument's sake, and then 80% of the things you do is like a $10 an hour task. And so many entrepreneurs have that, like they don't focus on their core strength. And it would be like, if they just focus on their core strength constantly and had another person or another 2 or 3 people doing that, yes, there's the overhead, but you can get on with what you're really good at. And that's something that I think is key, but it's probably for another conversation at a different time.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that hopefully people listening to us can take away with them, I think what you just said is really insightful, is actually sometimes thinking about how much you're paying people per hour and how much you are worth per hour. As we mentioned before, spending most of your time should be on those higher value activities where you're utilizing that unique ability. But where you've got a situation where you should go and research and do due diligence on opportunities, don't let that be you that does that due diligence on that opportunity. Empower someone else to go and do that work, so you don't have to get them to synthesize and bring everything together and bring it back to you to make a more informed decision whether or not you should or shouldn't do something, is very much worthwhile doing, and giving somebody else the opportunity to do that, and fully leveraging that is definitely worthwhile. We use that all the time for all different kinds of things that we see out there, where we make an opportunity to pick something up and run with it, or pick it up and drop it again because it's just not something that we want to explore into. Because in the agency world, things, technology, certainly marketing automation, and people's what people our clients are investing into, software, technology people are investing into, are changing. And so, we're always striving to keep ahead of that, and keep in line with the curve, so we can, keep ahead of the curve so that we can preempt that and we can serve our clients better. That always revolves some level of consistent development and research over how can we get on board with these new things that are coming out, to support those initiatives that the clients are running. So very insightful, I think, conversation for some people, because often they're trying to run with these opportunities and never really understanding where they may ultimately go. There's often not a lot of congruency with what they're doing, which pulls their focus away, and they probably could delegate that activity of researching to other people, and that's very much worthwhile for sure.
Interesting. One of the things I also want to mention is the opportunity of this podcast, because I know that whilst you and I do this podcast, I think that we could be doing it in a completely different way if we were looking for this podcast to provide us with clients or for us to get huge amounts of exposure and things. So if we looked at the revenue for this podcast, do you know what? I don't even know what it would be. You probably have a better idea than I would. But one thing that we know we didn't do it for that, so it doesn't really bother us too much. But it's interesting because I think that one thing is, like, we've talked a lot about the financial side of things. Is it worth doing it financially, or is it worth doing it for the progression of your company and things? Remember sometimes that, this is for the listener more than anything else, is like, sometimes you do things because you actually just genuinely like doing them and want to do them. And that's kind of equally as important. So whilst I couldn't put any billable hours to this particular podcast, you probably owe me, I probably should be getting an invoice from you, Oli, because I think that without you, it wouldn't have ever happened. But that's the beauty of this, is that you and I would have been having these calls anyway. And the great thing is we can just jump on and ask each other questions and run it as a podcast. So it's almost a leverage of something we're already doing and just turn it into a podcast. And if you're a listener, hopefully you're enjoying it. Me and Oli just ramble on about things, which is good.
I think in itself, though, I think that's exactly it. You know, kind of coming into it with some level of intent of what you want to have happen. What do you kind of want? Not necessarily want out of it, but there is something you get from it, and I think that in itself is a good reason to do what we do here, and also to hear the response and reviews that we get fairly regularly from listeners. It's nice to get that when that happens, even if they do mistake me for the clever one. Be it Tom Cruise, every now and again, but we can't have it always. So.
I don't think I've ever been mentioned as clever before. I get the guy with the grey hair. I get that every now and again. But,
okay.
Clever's a new one for me. Thank you.
That's good. I was looking for something
wear that with honour.
With a little bit more, cachet, but I just couldn't really think of it. So we'll just leave it as clever for now.
Okay, let's move on. Let me ask you this question then, and this is off the cuff, so I'm not sure if you'll even be happy for me to ask this question. But talking about opportunities and looking at like where you're going in the commander's intent and everything we've spoken about here, and also leverage and things with what you've already got and your layering. And I don't mind going after you if you like, but what does the future hold right now in terms of where you see Oli Bilson Marketing Agency going? What is it that you kind of like can see maybe in the short, medium, long term, whatever you want to share? Like, where are you going next?
Sure. I think that every business goes through different phases, and not necessarily just about revenue. How much revenue do they generate? But they also go through phases of other growth indicators. So, how many staff do they have? Perhaps how long that they've been in business. And with each of those stages comes certain challenges. At every stage there's different challenges. And in order to jump from one stage to the next, very rarely a business will ever jump it will never really ever leapfrog a stage. It's always going to grow through that stage, slowly or very quickly, but it still has to go through that stage and or phase. And so we've spoke about this on the podcast before, is the tactics and strategies that got somebody from up to 6 figures a year are very different from 6 figures to 500,000, and 500,000 to 7 figures, and 7 to 2 million, 2 million to 5 to 10, and 10 and above. So they are very different. And I think what you have to do is you have to grow. You can't expect as a leader, as a CEO, founder, entrepreneur, you can't expect your businesses to grow. You've got to, if you're not prepared to grow as well, you have got to invest in yourself to grow, to get you to that next phase of business, to be equipped with what you need to take on those challenges at that next phase of business. Now, for us, and talking about Oliver Bilson, we're very much in the phase of creating an attractive business to actually work for. Now, why is that important? Well, you know, it's not that client acquisition is not important or retention is not important to us. It's certainly a measurement. But in our phase of business where we are, we're really about focusing right now on creating a business that's attractive to work for, that is really hiring in talent and is actually investing in the right tools and resources to help our people grow, actually help them grow, and really empower them to be better versions of themselves. Degree of professional, personal development within people we already have in the business, as well as bringing new people in as well. What that'll enable us to do is to, one, for sure, it's not going to help us acquire more customers. That's for sure. What it will enable us to do is provide a better experience to our existing clients, but also provide, in turn, we will retain more clients, because our business has always been predicated on, number one, always focusing on results, not brand related activity. It's always been predicated on getting results with direct response, or as we put it, dynamic response marketing. So when we're sharply focused on that, we have to develop ourselves and our team to equip ourselves to do that job as well as we can do. And so, you know, getting the right people, attracting the right people is super important for us. And for me, is also extremely important, because it allows me to then focus my unique ability on other areas of the business that need development, as well, to give people the opportunity to rise up and take some responsibility for their own roles, and create some of those roles that are not yet filled, as it were, to bring more people in to the business. So that's really our kind of phase of business right now. What about you, Tom? What do you think?
It's really interesting hearing you talk about that, because literally we've just been going through a recruitment phase, and we're just about to go back into it as well to find more staff to help out. And it's a question mark in my mind of like whether I want to get more clients, or I want to get different types of deals with clients, or whether we go for just the bigger clients, and whether we want to split it out. Like, so viewability becomes viewability plus another brand, a bit like what Google did with Alphabet type scenario. Not to say that we're at the same level as that, but more a case of saying, well, viewability runs extremely well. I'm very happy with it, and we're starting to get to bigger and bigger clients. And it's like what required us to run a very successful agency previously. There's different demands and different challenges, I suppose, when it comes to different types of clients. Like a whole nother level above means that we need to provide service on a it's just a different type of level. It's not any more focus or any less focus. It's just like, okay, this is a different type of client that we need to focus on. They require different things. We're working with a much bigger team, for example, and so it just provides different scenarios to tackle. And whether we want to go that route, or whether we want to just just get more and more of the same, or we go down a different path, so to speak. And it's more a question of what type of agency do I want. I think the focus for me is definitely growth, of course, and that's kind of now built in within the agency. So it doesn't require me to grow it quite so much. It's still spearheaded by me, but the team can support with that process. So it doesn't really need me to do anything from the day to day. It's more of a leadership role that I'm kind of taking at the moment, and moving more and more into that role as we go. But the next wave of activity for me is to go back to the drawing board of research, really. So research and development, because with YouTube it's not like, and really with anybody doing anything, it's kind of like, whilst there's prescribed training out there, unlike YouTube advertising, there actually isn't training out there. It's like we're going out we're like pioneering into that space and not going to know what we're going to find. So it requires me to go into kind of like new campaigns and build stuff and see what works, see what doesn't work, test a load of stuff. And so I'm going into that much more heavily because it will support the team moving forwards to be like, okay, here's new strategies and tactics we can employ. But likewise, we're experimenting with a different idea of going down different pathways with deals that we have with clients. So whilst we've always been a CPA agency, so kind of cost per acquisition models that would be our preferred way of doing work with clients, we're now exploring the revenue share strategy, and also we've just kind of moving into a scenario where we hire talent to build another brand, so to speak. So like we're not having a client come to us, we're saying, well, we'll almost create the client, if that makes sense, for viewability to then promote. So that's a new area that we're getting into, and we're taking baby steps right now, seeing what it would be like, but coming with a lot of knowledge and a lot of like, we can create products very easily, we can do all the promotion very easily, we can we can build the whole website and do everything we need to very easily because we've got the whole team for that, so it's leveraging upon what we've already got. And now what we don't have is the products to sell. We can create products, but we don't have the talent to create that product or whatever it might be. So we're going into that market a little bit more heavily now to be like, okay, well, we'll go and hire that talent to create that product. And so that's something we're going into. It's a new area for us, and I'm not sure what the future holds with that, but it's definitely something we're testing right now. And so it means we're kind of diversifying a little bit as opposed to just like having that sole focus of just grow, grow, grow. We're starting to take stock a little bit more and looking at kind of like other ways of promotion, looking at a little bit more like the 30,000 foot view, looking down and being like, what should we be focusing on? Because whatever we find is going to massively steer the agency for the next move. So yeah, it's an exciting time, but also it's bringing new challenges, which is only good for me. I think that 2 years ago, if I looked at these sort of challenges, I would have been like, wow, not for me. It's like I wouldn't have had the mindset to think like that. But it soon comes around. If you start moving in the right direction, you start realizing you overcome lots of challenges along the way, and those bigger challenges you thought you had are now like, oh, yeah, of course we can do that now. And you just have that realization that you grow yourself. And so that's been a real nice realization for us as myself, but also in the agency, we can tackle bigger projects and not get daunted by them, and look very positively towards the next step as well. So that's been a really nice realization.
No, I love that. Yeah, that's good. I think, for those of you guys that are listening right now, me and Tom have been on interesting journeys to get to where we are, and looking forward to what the future holds.
We'll look back at this episode in like a couple of years' time or something. We're like, man, we were like looking back at that, we're like, God, we were so naive at that time. and then we'll move on, and then we'll keep on doing that over the next few years, I'm sure.
No, definitely love it. Cool, Tom. I can't wait to catch up in the next episode, and I look forward to catching you then and everyone else.
Nice one, Oli.